Welcome to the Homelab Show, episode 24. It's funny, I have to look over at it. Like I just said it, and then I'm like, I had to look over before I got it wrong. But we're going to be talking about Mycroft today because voice assistants are cool. But I think some people, rightfully so, are nervous because having the listening device in your room that sends it out to the cloud somewhere seems like something maybe you'd be a little bit concerned about and want to be cautious about. But that's where Mycroft comes in. So we figured, this is right up with the self-hosted podcast because it's self-hosting your own system to be able to do this. So that's pretty exciting for sure. Have Jay here. So welcome, Jay. And of course, Josh from Mycroft. So we're excited to get this started. Someone said there's no audio. No, other people said, all right, sorry, distraction. I was making sure everything seems to be working. We all can hear each other. So it should be working perfectly fine. Sorry about that.
Yeah. It scared me. It's probably a Linux Pulse audio issue, honestly, if I had to guess.
Yeah.
But we're not going to go there. We're not going to talk about that.
No problem. All right. I see people saying we have audio, making sure because we do this live for those who only listen to us as a podcast. We do this live as well. So we have both audiences. All right. Now, the first thing we have to do is thank a sponsor of the show so we can, get some bills paid here. And that is the Lenode. We have been a Lenode user for a long time. If you're listening to this, if you've been on the website, the Homelab show, it is all hosted over Lenode. Jay takes care of all that, setting it up and configure it, which is also, if there's ever a problem, I just blame Jay. It's easier.
Yeah. And last time there's a problem, it was a typo. So, the thing is, it happens to all of us. Nobody's perfect. I don't care how long you've been working in the industry. You'll make mistakes. That's never going to stop. That's just how it goes. But using Lenode as a sponsor was not a mistake because it's been working out very well for me. On Learn Linux TV, the entire web presence is on Lenode. So I've had quite a bit of familiarity with Lenode. They've been a sponsor of that channel for quite a while now. So it was a natural fit here because, yes, this is a Homelab podcast, but I think the beauty of Homelab is that you can decide what you want internal and what you are willing to have in the cloud. And that is an intelligent decision you make of and by yourself for your Homelab. Maybe you have a VPN server on Lenode or a sync thing node where what was the name of that feature that it has on sync thing?
The private encrypted nodes. Yes, that's another feature. And if you want something in the cloud, and I've been working on, and of course everyone's been asking when they're going to be ready, is some new WireGuard videos. And I think I'm going to use Lenode for all of the because I like building my own VPN servers. You can't trust these companies, but you can trust yourself. You can't trust yourself not to make typos sometimes, but at least you made the typo, not another company. So,
and what you can do is you can actually, since you are the VPN provider at that point, you could manage the logs yourself. And let's be honest, I think the best way to manage logs for a VPN provider is pipe them over to /dev/null, which you can do on Lenode. So that way, all the logs go in a black hole, and you don't have to worry about news from some provider making a mistake because you are the provider. You created the server, so you call the shots on it.
Yep, and then you'll be the first one to know if you get a takedown notice. It'll come to you.
They will. I'm knocking at your door. Hopefully not. Hopefully that never
oddly relevant this week for those of you following the news. But anyways, before we get off topic, welcome, Josh. Let's start talking about. Well, actually, Jay has to announce something real quick. I don't want to skip.
Yeah, I want to spend a moment to just make a quick announcement. I'm probably going to do a live stream. I don't think I'm going to do it this week. I still might. I might do it next week. But as of October 1st, Learn Linux TV will be my only job. So up until that date, I've basically been working two jobs. Learn Linux TV has become, I don't want to call it a job because it's a passion, but there's a lot of hours spent, wearing two hats. And it's finally at the point now where I've gave notice at work. It was really hard because the company that I work for is amazing. So how do you leave an amazing company? It's really hard to do. But I had to because I'm only one person and I can only do one gig. So Learn Linux TV will be my only job, which will hopefully mean more content. There probably won't be any difference until, mid-October or something like that. But, it's happening. So I'm at the same time, I'm excited and a little scared, but, I think it's going to go great.
Yeah. And technically you kind of had a gig before because you did publish a book or two. So there's some other little side hustles Jay's got to keep the education content flowing. So
Yeah, and I consider the book a part of it, but also that gives me more flexibility with books because maybe I'll
there's
write
another
another
book in the
one.
works.
Maybe I will, and I won't have to spread my time so thin. I mean, there's some days I wake up at 8 in the morning and I'm not done until 11 at night. So
Yeah.
I'll be happy just being done at 5, honestly.
Yeah, it's hard because I do the same thing. I was playing with I brought up WireGuard because I've been playing with so much WireGuard stuff, diving deep into it, getting ready because it takes a lot to make to make tutorials really concise and short. You have to spend a lot of time understanding all the edge cases to create the most concise level of documentation. So it takes so many more hours to create concise documentation than to kind of ramble on of how all the things I tried to get here.
And you heard me complain last night off the air about the current video I'm working on and how I can't reproduce the problem. It's working
Oh yeah,
fine. So how do I make a video about a problem if I can't reproduce the problem? Anyway,
yeah.
long story. But yeah, it'll be a new adventure for me. So I'm really excited for it. And I think there's big things coming. So yay.
Yep. All right. Now on to the personal assistant that you can self-host. This is cool. And
Yep.
it's, I don't think we've ever had it accidentally go off during a Homelab show, but certainly when me and Jay are talking, there's a little box behind him and it
Yep.
is accidentally just started talking. I mean, that's
And you'll see, yeah, I mean, people that watch my YouTube channel have seen it in the background for quite some time. I bought it like I think 2 years ago or more to do some videos about it. I didn't get around to it then because I had 2 jobs, right? So it's really hard. I have to be very selective about the content that I do. But now that won't be a problem anymore. The things that people have been asking for or that they have been asking for will be done because I'll have the time. And, for a year, people are like, well, you have Mycroft, do some videos on it. I'm like, yeah, but I have, other things going on. And then eventually I did this April Fool's joke that I hope people saw that Mycroft was the star of the whole
yes.
video. It was something that was like a guilty pleasure for me where I just did something that was completely different than anything on my channel ever. And I labeled it as a Debian review. You got a Debian review in that video. It just wasn't me reviewing it. It was Mycroft. So there's going to be a lot more content on Mycroft on my channel this year, actually. Hopefully, maybe even as soon as this coming November. So it's something that I've been using. But I think what we should do is kind of take a step back and let Josh from Mycroft introduce himself, let us know his role there, and he could let people know that have not heard of Mycroft what it is and what the goal is that it's trying to solve.
Sure thing. Well, thank you very much for having me out, Jay and Tom. It's nice to be here. Congratulations, Jay, on joining the world of the self-employed/unemployed. For me, that leap took place quite a while ago, but it was really similar to what you're talking about. Is I had a passion. In our case, we were building a makerspace. And this is before Amazon Echo and before Google Home, and Siri only existed on the Apple in the Apple ecosystem. And I got some friends together and we decided, hey, we want to build a voice assistant for our makerspace. We want to build that Jarvis experience from the original Iron Man. And from that lowly beginning, ends up being as now my full-time job. My title here at Mycroft is actually founder at the moment. We found a CEO who has a lot more experience than anybody else at the company and brought him on a couple of years ago. So I get to go out and talk to folks like you and to customers and the community and talk about what makes Mycroft special. So that's my role here now. Yeah, the self-employed thing is great. It's really an exciting adventure. So I'm excited to see you headed in that direction.
Yeah, the whole
Thank you.
I think the concept of the voice assistants, like I said earlier, is a really interesting one. And it's all of, when I was looking at anything sci-fi as a kid, and by the way, today is the Star Trek release anniversary. And, they talk to the computer and things like that. That was part of it. I think it was, futurists really predicted it to be here sooner than it was. And of course, no one's seen it coming to become like a war between large companies and how much data they can have on us and maybe not be the best stewards of all that data. So that's why I think Mycroft is so cool, because it's not that the concept of voice is the problem. It's maybe who has control over it can be a little bit of an issue. And I think that's what you guys really solve.
Yeah, I mean, when we got started, it was more about being open than it was about being private. But as you guys know, openness and privacy go hand in hand, right? If you can't see what's going on inside the black box, there's a pretty good chance that whoever owns the black box is keeping an eye on you, even if it's just log files, right? And so, when we got started, it was about openness. It was about having the ability to have a device that you could do whatever you wanted to do with. You could use it, install third-party standards on it. For example, putting a Z-Wave or a Zigbee USB stick in the side of it and using it to directly control IoT devices. That's something that didn't really exist when we first started shipping the Mark One. Being able to change the wake word, something simple like that you would expect to be able to do with your, this is your computer, right? In your home, you should be able to name it Bob if you want to name it Bob. And that really didn't exist. And then from there, it's gradually become apparent that privacy is really a key in this technology. I mean, we all carry around mobile devices that have two live microphones, connected to an operating system that in many cases we don't fully control, connected to a network connection that we also don't fully control. And that monitors us in most cases nearly 24 hours a day. Adding always listening microphones to your home that then send those same companies even more data about you is just it's really a challenge for a lot of people, and that's something that we're really excited to help people solve here at Mycroft.
I'm excited about that. I've had some situations, I think many people have experienced this, where even without an automated assistant, some weird things happen. Like I was talking to or mentioning to my kids we're going to a pharmacy or something like that to pick up a prescription, and then I'm waiting in line to get that, and I look at my phone and just pull up Facebook randomly, and then there's an ad for a pharmacy. I'm like, what? Like, and at first I'm like, yeah, that's a coincidence, but it keeps happening. And then I have a conversation about ADHD, which I've been open about that I have. But then I see ADHD ads. I'm like, okay, like this is not cool. Like, I can go off on a tangent on that, but I won't. I think that giving people control where they could say, yeah, I mean, Siri looks cool and, Amazon Echo, that looks nice, but I'd rather just kind of do it myself, which is kind of the heart and soul of this podcast is people want to do their own thing and make their own decisions. And now they have an automated assistant that can be a part of that decision.
Well, I think the other thing is being open source, and it brings more community involvement into this. So it's not like I'm only limited to here's what the developer allows me to have access to. It's like, hey, I can look at it, I can tinker with it, I can start modifying it and do a deeper level of integration. Or generally, it would, as it goes to lots of open source things, it gets contributed back. Like, hey, I started with this. Here's my contribution back. Here's a module, the add-on. Maybe someone else would like to do these things and these features. But I want to get, because we've been talking about this, so let's talk about how Mycroft actually works, because obviously it's not running in some cloud somewhere, it's running locally, and as Jay has over his shoulder there, a physical box that it's running on. So let's talk a little bit about like some of the hardware and software that runs it and how it does all that.
Sure. So Mycroft is primarily based in the world of Raspberry Pi. There's a lot of folks that do have it running on desktops, and it can really run any place. The folks over at RISC, we're converting it actually to RISC architecture. The idea behind Mycroft is that you can run the entire stack locally. So when you look at a voice assistant experience, it really consists of four major parts. The first is the Wakeboard spotter, and that's in our case, a little neural network that sits there and runs on device. It's attached to the microphone. You were talking about Pulse Audio at the beginning of the podcast, and yes, we have much experience with Pulse and also trying to get everything to play nicely together. So that's been quite the experience on Linux.
Linux audio can be quite challenging for sure.
It can be, and it means that you have to, if you're producing something that's consumer ready, it means that you do have to take a lot of control for in that experience, because the average consumer, most consumers don't want to shell into their device to fix a setting or to chase down a challenge, and Linux actually is great at that, we've found, and so so yeah, the Wakeboard listener runs locally. It connects to the audio bus and listens for just the Wakeboard, right? So we have a sampling of, I don't even know how many samples. It's millions and millions and millions of samples of people saying, "Hey, Mycroft," and we get those samples from individuals who make an active decision to donate their data back to the community. So by default, if you install Mycroft on a Raspberry Pi or on a Mark I, or if you've got one of the Mark II dev kits that we've been shipping, it keeps nothing and it sends nothing, and we don't log anything. Like we do the absolute bare minimum that we can possibly do in terms of data retention to make that service work, right? And but for people who do opt in, we're able to grab those Wakeword utterances and put them into a training algorithm and then improve the Wakeword spotter over time. So it's not only open source from the standpoint of the software, but we also make that data set available to the public so that they can improve things too. Because, you know, in the modern world, source code is really only part of the solution to providing a modern experience for a web service, right? For almost any web service you use out there today, machine learning becomes a part of that process. And as an open source community, we need to be able to solve both of those problems, right, in an open and transparent way. And so anyway, so we have a neural network that listens to the microphone. It listens for the wake up phrase, which by default is "Hey, Mycroft," but you can actually train your own wake words. And then it puts the device into listening mode, right? And it listens until it hears a silence or until it times out. And then it sends that data up for transcription, right? And unfortunately, you can run this entire thing locally. That's without a doubt. But the transcription piece of it, you know, we're really heavily dependent on technologies like the Mozilla voice stack, where, you know, building a full language transcription engine turns out to be a significant challenge. I think that those guys have started the guys from the Mozilla project have started a new company called Koki, which also does full language transcription and as I recall was open source. So the audio sample gets sent for transcription and turned into text, and then it gets sent to an intent engine. We have two intent engines. One of them is a neural network based engine called Pedacious, and the other one is a known entity rules engine. And what that transcription engine does is what the intent parser does is it grabs that text and it figures out what you're trying to do by extracting objects from it, right? So if you say turn the lights on in the kitchen, it looks and it says, you know, turn lights on. Okay, that's an IoT intent. You know, the objects are lights in kitchen and the position is on, and it returns it as a JSON structure, which, you know, an IoT skill on the device then goes out to the network and performs the action. If it's not an action you're asking for, so if you're saying, you know, what's the height of the Eiffel Tower, it goes out to, in that case, it probably would go to either Wolfram Alpha or Wikipedia, gets the data, and then creates a verbal response. And then on the Mark II, it also puts up a what's called a card that might have a picture of the Eiffel Tower, right? And so all of that stuff takes place locally. By default, we host a transcription engine, or we host a proxy for a transcription engine. So it sends us the audio sample. We send that up to a third-party provider, transcribe it from our IP address, right, not from yours, transcribe it, and then send back the text, and then nuke the log. And then, of course, you know, a lot of the services you're accessing are also online. So if you're asking for the height of the Eiffel Tower, it went out to Wikipedia and got the data. However, if you were just asking it to turn the lights on, and you're running an instance of Mozilla's Common Voice or Mozilla's speech transcription engine somewhere on your network, you can run that entire experience, you know, without sending any data at all to the internet, which is pretty exciting. I hope that made sense.
Yes, no, it does. And I want to unpack a couple of things. We'll start with the neural nets in the programming of those. Like you said, there's source code is one side, but it's the training sets that you use to build that. Those are really, it takes a lot to train them. I don't write code like that, but I've been to some deep presentations on it. And it's actually kind of interesting how like watching how I've seen some of the most basic demos and how they keep stacking on top till you build this incredibly complicated training set. It's interesting, and the amount of data it takes to get that accurate is kind of cool. I also like that you said that by default it's not sending some of that data, because that's obviously, as Steve gets him, I've always liked the words to use, the tyranny of the default, because if you leave it at the default, it's kind of a problem, because it will just automatically send it, and opting out, they sometimes make buried. So the fact that you have opt in for like the trigger word one for improving it, that's actually pretty cool. And the last thing is the connectivity, those engines that it does send data to. So you act as a proxy to each of those, you said, and then it's your IP address each time that actually does it. And then you say you nuke the logs afterwards.
Yeah. So, the best speech transcription out there by far, right, is the transcription engine that Google provides, right? Because they have access to so much data. And so the question becomes is, okay, how do we use that engine without, giving away all the secrets to all your secrets to Google? So there's two things that we do to protect the users from that. So number one is we're doing the wakeword spotting on the device in the home, right? So, none of the audio, unless it's been woken up, none of that audio is being sent anywhere, right? It runs through the neural network and then to dev null, it just disappears. The only segment that we actually send up for transcription is between the wakeword, when it senses the wakeword, and when it times out, or when it hits when it detects silence, right? And so we send that up to our server, and then our server sends that to a third party. By default, we are using Google for that. But of course, the only thing that Google's got visibility of is the audio sample itself and our IP address, right? It has no idea that it's coming from, somebody who's using Mycroft in McMurdo Station, Antarctica, or somebody who's using Mycroft in, Stockholm, Sweden. And, we eventually want to be using a speech transcription engine that we actually run, right? And so, we've done a lot of work with the Common Voice folks over at Mozilla, trying to improve those tools. But as of today, or the last time we checked it, the Mozilla tools didn't have full language speech transcription that was accurate enough for these technologies to work. The key enabler that made it time for the voice assistants today instead of 1985 or 1968, right? The key enabler was speech transcription engines that are north of 95% accurate, because anything below that, and the thing it's become so frustrating for people to use that they don't want to use it.
Yeah, they'd rather just type it at that point, because computers rely on that level of accuracy. They have to understand it. I think the thing that not everyone realizes is when you mentioned intent, Google, they have done such a good job of people not realizing how good their AI systems are in understanding intent. It was when I had seen a demo, and this goes back a number of years ago when they did this. It was, if you ask it something like, hey, how old is like Clint Eastwood or some actor? And then all you do is the next question is, how tall is he? And the intent goes, hey, you just asked about this person, so you must also be asking about the height of that person. So it's almost like this whole natural language to try and figure that out. So that object and then intention of people, because that's how we speak. We don't always restate each thing. So we can say, turn the lights on in the living room. And then we might say, and in the kitchen. When you can start getting to where it's so seamless, to where human language doesn't have to be as precise, it's more natural. I think that's where these things, we're converging there slowly. But that's when the average person who's not listening to this podcast, that just, the non-techie user really starts to enjoy these things. And that's really hard to get to. People, if you're not familiar with how coding and programming works, you don't realize how hard it is to understand the intention and parsing out the objects of language to really understand what someone wanted to say. And I think that's going to be a challenge for probably a somewhat foreseeable future of getting all that to work together. I'm assuming that's, like you said, figuring out those objects to figure out intent can be tricky.
Yeah, and one of the cool things about the modern world, right, is that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. You have the team at Koki and the team at Mozilla working on open source speech transcription, right? And then you've got Alex over at Rasa, right? Rasa NLU, which is they were based in Europe. I think he moved to San Francisco. He got a bunch of funding, but it's an open source natural language processing engine, right? that allows you to do exactly what you said, is to create stateful speech transcription, where it keeps the state of the conversation and allows you to add follow-on questions, right? And in that case, once again, it uses machine learning to figure out what the intent was, as well as object parsing and things like that. And so yeah, the one of the inspirations behind Mycroft was, the original Mycroft stack was like 75 lines of Python, if that. It might have been 30 lines of Python. And it was sending everything out to third parties just to make it work. In that case, we used Wit AI, which was later bought by Facebook for the NLU. But yeah, like it went from that to what it is today, where we actually have the Wakeboard spotter that we built. We do some of the NLU stuff. We're looking probably to add Rasa to that stack sometime soon. We do the speech synthesis, so now I can swear. Like, if nothing else, we're the only voice assistant that you can actually make swear at you.
Well, that's the reason to use it right there. I mean, just
there you go. There you go. And so the idea was that we could use third parties for a lot of these and just tie it together into one experience. And then as those third party technologies, become more open and more capable in the open source community, we can include them as options. And then, it becomes the person using the technology. I hate the word user because it's very, it has a lot of implications that are closer to the opioid crisis than to technology, right? Yeah. So it's up to the customer who's making use of that product to decide which ones they want to use, right? Like there's speech synthesis engines from the bigger players that have better prosody, cadence, tone than our engine, our Mimic 2 engine that we built. And so if they want to use that, that's great. And, they make the decision as to what the privacy trade-off there is and what the trade-off is with usability. And then we don't have a vested interest in whichever one you use, right? Like we want you to have the best experience possible. So, by default, we want to ship something that's as private as it can be while providing a great experience. And then if you want to open that up and use, build a Rasa server for the NLU so that you can have it do cool stuff around, medical, right? Like if you're a hospital. And then you want to use, the Alexa speech synthesis engine for speech synthesis. And, you want to get rid of the Wakeword thing entirely and use a push button instead of a Wakeword. You can do all of those things inside the stack, which is really what we wanted to do from the get-go, right? And facilitate people doing all kinds of cool stuff.
I think what's cool too is, as we said in the beginning, being very open source means we can look inside of these devices, so to speak, at the software level and understand exactly where the data is going. The devices made by all the other companies are just, they're, as you said, black mystery boxes of, we don't get to know what they do. They tell us they do one thing, and then later some security researcher goes, "Hey, did you know there was this extra thing inside of here?" I think one of them we'd found something else inside of there, and their answer was, "Well, it's not activated yet." And we're like, "Wait, it's got a what?" I think, was it the Nest that they found a microphone in that we didn't know was? Yeah, and it's like, that's interesting. That wasn't on the box.
Yeah, and Facebook, just last week got fined by Ireland like $200+ million for, using WhatsApp data. I mean, WhatsApp, an app that was really designed for privacy from the get-go, using that in inappropriate ways. And, when it comes to VPN, there's another example. Facebook bought a VPN app called Anovo, right? And, then turned around and used the VPN data from their customers to, better target Facebook advertising at them. And eventually, when they got busted, they had to shut it down, right? And so, the big Silicon Valley companies, and I'm sure you've heard this, right? If you're not paying for it, you're probably if you're not paying for the product, you're probably the product.
Right? Yeah.
And absolutely.
Yeah, they monetize our existence. It's as simple as that. That's their business model.
Yeah, I think the thing that I don't understand about the companies that do the things that you were saying is that they get caught every single time. And if you use common sense, it's like, Yeah, you have your general people that use computers and they're not really looking for anything, but there's always that person, right, that's doing a packet capture. It happens every single time. There's like 0% possibility that somebody somewhere isn't going to do a packet capture and find out where those packets are going, because that's what people do in this field. They want to learn this stuff. And here we have an open platform. We don't even have to packet capture. I mean, you can, but you can look at the source code. You can find out exactly where things are going, which is really great.
Yeah, that's exciting. And the for us, the goal is not only to change this from the technology side of things. Like, we're technologists, and like we started this in a makerspace. Like, all the original Mark II dev kits, we printed them on the SLA printer behind me. Like, we're young and scrappy, but one of the things that we want to do as an organization is take that and turn it into something that's financially meaningful, right? To, as partially as a demonstration for the public, but also, to return for investors. That privacy, you can respect privacy, that people are willing to pay for privacy, right? And that, Mycroft's based on a character from a Heinlein novel, and in that novel, one of the phrases they use is "tan staffel." There's no such thing as a free lunch, right? If you're not paying for the product, you're the product, right? If the another great example of that is the Amazon Prime, right? So, you pay for Amazon Prime for shipping. I don't know what percentage of the world does, but I'd strongly suspect all three of us in this conversation do.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it includes streaming media, right? Like that was just like out of left field. Like, I pay to ship packets, and now I can watch movies on the TV. And how do those things connect? And the way that those things connect is that what you watch on TV and how you consume media tells a company a ton about you as a consumer, right? So, the fact that I love The Expanse, that I've read all of the novels, that I've seen the entire Expanse TV series on Amazon Prime, tells the Bezos crew a lot about me. And it means that the ads that I see, all over the internet, the ads that I see on my phone, those are targeted to me as an individual because they've learned about me by streaming media. It's not about entertaining me. It's about obtaining data about me. And this same person wants to put an always listening microphone in every room of my house, right? and for me, that's just that's a non-starter. Like, I already sacrifice a lot of privacy with my phone, and frankly will switch to a pure Linux phone as soon as one comes out that has the competitive features that I need, right?
Yeah.
And that same statement is why we're bringing a smart speaker to market, right? Because there's a ton of people out there who are like, hey, I love the idea of a smart speaker. I can play my music. I can listen to the news. I can ask it general questions. It can help me do the math, right? Like, when people struggle with doing math in their head. And I'm waiting for something to come out that's private and has competitive features. And so, that's what we've been trying to bring to market, with the Mark I, which was our first kind of development device, and really for guys like Jay, right? Like, people who are willing to hack around and break out the command line terminal and reflash it from time to time when things go south. And then the Mark II, which is envisioned as being a real consumer device, right? That my mom can take it and put it on the counter of her kitchen and have a great experience, have it auto update, and be able to use it on a day-to-day basis and not worry about who's got that microphone turned on and is listening to them 24 hours a day. So
yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would say it also gives you the option, kind of talking about like the content curation. One of the reasons we provide full RSS for our podcast is so you don't have to use some type of feed aggregation service where those aggregation services will determine whether or not you can listen to that podcast, because that's been the new thing. Some of the podcasts that get popular, and Spotify's been guilty of this, they buy exclusivity so they can get more people that are following audiences, and being able to just go, nope, we want to be able to put these feeds, curate them, pull them directly in on a device. Makes it, I kind of like that. It's kind of another compelling use case. I didn't think about it as much, but that's one of the reasons I don't use those for it. I usually download the actual files, whether they're OGG or MP3, to listen to my podcasts. That's cool. Yep. I like that.
And speaking about, I was going to say, speaking about my experience with Mycroft, because when I did the April Fool's video, I also did another video where I'm actually having a conversation with Mycroft back and forth. And I was able to do that. And I don't think I've ever talked about how I did this, but I was able to SSH into Mycroft. So already that's a win. Like, if I can SSH into a device and poke around, that's great. And it wasn't like I was in some kind of jail or anything. Not that that necessarily would be a bad thing. I mean, I still, as long as it's open source and I can expect the source, that's fine. But I was able to just run all the normal Linux commands. And then since it's open source, like I didn't know how to talk to Mycroft to get it to say what I wanted it to say rather than what, it's programmed to say. But I just used SSH, and then I found that I think it's the speak module in the Python implementation, if I remember correctly. And I was able to type out what I wanted it to say. And then I would have my finger on the enter button, and I'd be talking to it, and I would time pressing the enter button exactly to when I wanted him to respond to something that I was saying. But I was able to do that because nothing was hidden from me. And I think that's was my favorite part of that experience.
Yeah, and for that application, there's a couple of cool things that happen. Number one, you can always tell Mycroft, say, the moon is green, right? And he will repeat back whatever you say. Now, you are kind of at the mercy of the transcription engine there, where, in that case, he won't swear because the transcription engine that by default, won't return swear words. But you can absolutely swear from the CLI, and having spent a lot of time on the CLI, I do swear when I use the CLI. And the other thing is catching, and this is kind of cool, a cool feature that we've been working on over time. As we get those audio phrases, we don't know who they came from, right? Like we just have the original text and the transcription, right? But we can cache those, by getting a fingerprint, shoving them in a folder, so that if somebody else asks for the weather in the same location, or the weather is the same, right? It's 78 and sunny. That gets cached to a folder, and we can return it instantly without having to synthesize that data. And over time, our goal is to have, as many of those phrases cached as we possibly can, locally, ideally, so that you don't even have to go, when it says, hey, it's 78 and sunny, it's actually grabbing a local OGG or probably an MP3, probably compressed, and playing that back in the speaker, right? But to do the types of things we're doing, we definitely need to get a lot bigger, right? And that's one of the things that we're really working on. We need, we have about 5% of our customers opt to share their data, and that's actually more data than we can process today. But we need to build that community and make that community bigger, both from the standpoint of people who are donating their data, people who are volunteering their time to go and tag that data. That's something else that we've been in the past we've had running, and we're looking to relaunch, the ability to play that audio file back and get somebody to correct the transcription for people who donate their data, and then feed that back into the machine learning engine. And then also, finally, for us to be commercially relevant, right? Which for us is a big deal. Voice is the fastest growing segment of the technology sector. The adoption of smart speakers actually eclipsed the adoption of smartphones in terms of its velocity. If you remember back in 2006, we all had flip phones, and then fast forward like 3 years and everyone had a smartphone, right? Yeah. And it's the same thing with voice. It's that, a few years ago, nobody had a smart speaker in their kitchen. Today, for people who are part of the general ecosystem and haven't thought through the privacy applications, it's almost, it's becoming nearly universal adoption. But there's still this one big segment, and it turns out it's about 20% of the public, right, who want a smart speaker, right, but don't want big tech spying on them, right? And so that's really who we're building this technology for. And one of the things we're doing as part of that is raising money, right? Which right now, we looked at that and said, at every step of our process, how do we be community focused, right? So when we launched the company, we did a Kickstarter for the Mark I, which we delivered about 2 years later. And we built it on Raspberry Pi, we built it on Python, and we did a ton of focus around building community. That's what Ryan Sipes did when he was here before, he moved on to Mozilla to build even bigger communities. When we went out to raise money, the first time we used Regulation CF crowdfunding, which allowed us to take up to $1 million, and we ended up hitting the statutory maximum from community members, so that we could be a community funded project, so that we wouldn't be beholden to like 3 venture capital firms in Silicon Valley, the way that a lot of the other companies are. When we decided to launch a consumer device, we did an even bigger Kickstarter, and actually, intervening time, the SEC has changed the rules, and you can now raise actual significant money using Reg CF. It's no longer capped at $1 million. You can now raise $5 million. So we're actually out raising money today, raising the next $5 million so that we can ship, the Mark II, which is the consumer device that we've been shipping dev kits for a while, and then also become relevant, right? Get the assembly line started, getting mass production started, getting out there into big box retailers, right? Making sure that you can get a Mycroft at the big box, whether it's JB Hi-Fi in Australia or Carrefour in Europe or Walmart here in the United States, that you can go and grab a Mycroft off the shelf, take it home, plug it in, and that everybody can have that private experience, not just, those of us who are willing to get into the CLI. So that's really exciting.
And I'll speculate that we will not be buying this with our Amazon Prime accounts.
No, we don't have plans to be on Amazon. We do have a product on Amazon right now, though. Mycroft was approached by a patent troll about 1.5 years ago, and instead of paying the $30,000 demand, we decided to litigate. So we're about $500,000 into litigating against this patent troll, and one of the things that he's done is, at every step when the broader Linux community has given this guy a hard time on the internet, a guy by the name of Todd Toomey. And he looks exactly like you'd expect a patent troll to look.
Just evil.
Yeah, like the 3 buttons of his like a formal picture. He's got like the 3 buttons of his shirt unplugged with like the hair sticking out, right? Like, yeah.
I have a picture in my head of Shrek. I don't know why.
Yeah,
Shrek is friendlier than patent trolls.
Yeah, he is pretty friendly. Yeah.
So at every, and I'm hesitant to even mention the guy's name online because I know he's going to go whine to a federal judge that I mentioned his name online, right? Like Toomey the troll. So anyway, so people would give him a hard time, online, and he would go whine to a federal judge about it. So we looked at it and we said, we want to talk about patent trolling in general because it's just really terrible for communities like us that we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars fighting patent trolls instead of building technology. And so I wrote a children's book. It's called Mycroft and the Patent Trolls. It's available on Amazon. It's also available directly on our website. And if you buy it on our website, we get 100% of the proceeds. So please go there if you're going to buy one. It's actually a great little book for kids, and it explains what a patent troll is and how to battle patent trolls in a way that even a 5-year-old or a member of the U.S. Congress can understand. And so anyway, so if you have a kid and are looking for an exciting story, or you just want to give it to a patent troll, please, we did that as a fundraiser, partially as a fundraiser, partially to raise awareness. But yeah, Mycroft and the Patent Troll is the only product that I'm aware of that we have on Amazon at the moment. And then of course, we're out raising money at Start Engine. Folks who are interested in supporting and backing small companies, that are open and private. This is probably something that you might want to look at. And one of the other kind of cool things about that, and one of the things that big tech has taken away from us, right, is, back in the 90s when people started a company, they went public fairly quickly. Right, Starbucks, just after a couple years, Amazon actually is a great example. Amazon went public in 1997, and if you'd have invested in Amazon in 1997, you'd have made 120,000% return on your investment, right? Because at the time they weren't really worth a whole lot, right?
Right.
Fast forward past the .com boom, and all of the or Sarbanes-Oxley and all of the legislation. And all of a sudden, companies like Coinbase, when they go public, they're already worth like $50 billion. So, these Silicon Valley insiders got all of the huge gains, right? SpaceX still isn't public, right? The Silicon Valley insiders got all of these huge gains, and, the general public ends up being the guys who buy it at the end. So one of the other things that we're excited about, and one of the reasons we're raising funds through the community, is giving people the opportunity to be here early to the party, as opposed to 5 years from now, us going public and, having had all those run-ups for insiders. And then, at the end of it, the public only gets a modest return. So yeah, lots of community type stuff going on, from fighting patent trolls to raising money to, shipping the Mark II, which should come just as soon as we start the mass production line. And the design for that is done, and we've actually shipped, I want to say 300 dev kits out to folks, with laser cut plastics, and folks are having a pretty good experience with that.
Yeah. Something I want to cover, because we've talked about technology and the business model. One thing is talk a little bit, says we probably should cover this beginning. Like, how do you set this up? So you get the device. Do I need one for each room? Do I need to buy a few of these? What's the layout? And what are some? Well, Jay can probably talk to some of the integrations, because I know he can turn his lights on and off with this. I'll let Jay talk to the integrations, but describe the layout for us a little bit of like how we would set this up if we wanted to get started.
So, I'd recommend starting with one, the same as, any piece of tech, right? And make sure you're happy with it. We don't do a lot of the sound synchronization stuff that you see from Sonos. And then I guess Sonos sued Google for stealing their tech so that Google could do it, where it synchronizes the audio across multiple speakers. It sits in the corner or on a tabletop. The new one has a screen. So, the screen faces the room. And then, we spent a ton of time on the setup process with the Mark II, working to make it really consumer friendly. So, in that case, you turn it on, it sets up a little Wi-Fi hotspot. You connect to the Wi-Fi hotspot with your phone. You put in the credentials for your Wi-Fi network. It tears down its local Wi-Fi hotspot, connects to your network, generates a pairing code. You then go to our website and pair it. And then, of course, you can manage the settings from our website. I will say that the web portion of it, which is called Selene, right, which is our backend, is all open source. So if you wanted to run that backend locally on a server, you absolutely can pull it down, and we would have no visibility of that device at all. However, Selene is like 4 or 5 virtual machines all working together and networked and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. So for an average user, it's probably better to use our backend. And then, that's the piece where we're looking to make sure that we communicate TAN-STAFL, right? There's no such thing as a free lunch. And so, our goal is to get some percentage of our customers to actually pay for using that backend. And that becomes how the company supports itself long-term, instead of advertising and spyware and all the other stuff that the Silicon Valley companies do. So,
yeah. And I think paying for a service is fine. Like, to me, because it's clear. It's always so convoluted with the big companies of what they're monetizing and what they're charging me for, because it's a hybrid model with some of them, like Amazon. I pay for Prime, I get things. I also get spied on, and they monetize my existence while also charging me for Prime. But I like the free shipping, and I like watching The Expanse. But at least I don't mind though, like saying, all right, I pay for this service and this is what I get. To me, an example, and we talked about it before, I believe, on this show, and I've talked about it on my YouTube channels, like Bitwarden. It's free, it's open source. By the way, we have a license fee. Could you hack the source code and take it out? Sure. But why? It's very reasonable. I don't mind paying for the development of that product. We use it commercially here at my business. And to me, that's like a great trade. I know what I'm getting. I know what I'm paying for. The license fees are reasonable. And I'm like, perfect. I'll pay you for the service and I'll enjoy it over here. I know it's open source, so I can always look inside to see what's going on. And I know they're not trying to find another way to monetize, like selling some data they know about me. That to me is just a better... it's an upfront exchange. We can call it an old school traditional business model, maybe. But I think that's something our users will be comfortable with.
I think the important takeaway, in my opinion, is that it's a choice that people make, or I should say it should be a choice, because the idea works out. Because if you don't mind your personal information, if you know exactly what's being recorded and you know what's going on there, you make that decision for yourself. No, I'm not comfortable with that, so I'm going to just not use that product. Or I'm okay with that in exchange for the value that the product gives me. But then what we end up finding is that, there's a microphone in a device we didn't know about. One time, I don't know if it's Google Chrome or Chromium itself was activating the microphone and didn't let anyone know. And then Facebook gets in trouble for, recording likes for even those people that don't have a Facebook account. So at this point, it's really hard to say it's a choice. It should be, ethically it should be, but I feel more comfortable with a device that I can, access myself.
Yeah.
And I think with the Mark II, that makes sense because, if you are not a tech person at all, that's just not your thing, then a set it and forget it device is great, because that's what the Amazon Echo tries to be and is. But if I get an Amazon Echo, it might check the boxes for 75% of what I want it to do. And I think people are, they just use it for those things. And if it doesn't do something they would prefer it to do, it doesn't do that. So they just don't. But for the people that are into this kind of thing, and they want to look at the source code and either write their own module, or they want to just see if someone else has written a module, then they want that control. So the set it and forget it device can become something more for someone that wants more. And at the same time, they're in control of, where the data goes there. And speaking about integrations or the skills in Mycroft, I think we'd be doing a disservice to it by not mentioning that, because when you get Mycroft, I mean, it has some capabilities out of the box, which is awesome. It does a lot of things. You can even tell it to, or ask it to tell you a joke, for example, or the weather, and there's all kinds of things you can have it do. But you could download skills, and like an example of that is I think it's Volumio, or I can never say it right. But yeah, it's the software that you could run on a Raspberry Pi that makes your Raspberry Pi a jukebox. You just plug speakers into it. You get a web console. You just point it to your MP3s or whatever, and you could just click on it, tell it to play a song, and it's awesome. But then I found out that there's a skill for Mycroft to hook into that. So I could say, hey, name a personal assistant, play Lacuna Coil, and guess what? It does that. It hooks right into Volumio, starts playing that. And then there's Home Assistant integration, which I plan on getting into. So then, I already have the automation set up. I don't need to do that again. I just need to hook Mycroft into that so I can tell Mycroft what I want it to do, turn on the kitchen lights and have it do that for me. You can even tell Mycroft, you have to be careful, because on my unit, there's a 10100 Ethernet, but you could say, run a speed test. It'll run a speed test as long as you're not paying for more than the 100 megabits. But as most people in the United States, we are lucky to even get 100 megabits online. Let's be honest. But you could say, hey, run a speed test, and as long as you're not paying for a gigabit connection and you're within that, you know what your speed is. You don't even have to open a browser. There's all these cool things that you can do that I think is, adds a value to everyone, even if it's a beginner or someone who doesn't care about computers, or someone who loves technology, wants to become a programmer, or already is one. You could dive as deep as you want to, and you can integrate it with whatever is available, or just even if you're not a developer, say, hey, I got this idea. Is anyone keen on helping develop this thing? And we have that capability.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things and one of the reasons we based it on Raspberry Pi, right? So the Mark II, actually, there's a little door in the side that you can pop off. It exposes the USB ports and the Ethernet port, right, for the Pi. And that's based on a Pi 4, which has a gigabit LAN, right? So you should be able to run that gigabit speed test off of the Mark II if you plug it in. But the USB ports are also important, and that's especially important in the context of like Home Assistant. So, Home Assistant, runs on Raspberry Pi, right? And I think they do sell hardware on their website, but they're really not a hardware company. There's a software company, right? And so one of the things that we're really excited about with the Mark II is the ability to add a Z-Wave USB stick, add the Home Assistant skill, and then use the Mark II as your Home Assistant hub, right? Because, one of the things that we found with smart speakers, everybody was looking to be like, Smart Things, and all these other companies wanted to be Revolve, which got bought by Google, wanted to be the IoT hub of the house. And what we found is that it turns out that the smart speaker is the thing that makes the most sense to have as your IoT hub. But of course, the offerings from the other players don't necessarily let you hack and do all the things that you want to do as somebody who has IoT, a Z-Wave setup at your home. And so, being able to run Home Assistant on it is really crucial. And, for us, the whole idea is to facilitate innovation, right? We want people to create these awesome skills that do really great stuff, be able to share them out with the community, be able to get traction within that community. And then ideally, at the end of the day, we would provide a platform for other companies like Home Assistant that want to, expand their footprint, so that they can have a platform where they can make money without being beholden to these big tech giants that change the rules and demand 30% of every payment and so on and so forth. So, And we've got a couple of those. The guys at Chatterbox have used Mycroft to build an educational. It's not really a toy. It's a little educational robot that kids can use to learn to program. They've got a drag and drop programming interface for that. The guys at Cubo in Barcelona have integrated Mycroft into their robot. Some guys on Kickstarter, LumiCube, which is it's almost like a Rubik's Cube, but all sides are LEDs. And then it's got like orientation and accelerometers and stuff in it, and does all these really cool things with this LED cube. They integrated Mycroft into it. So yeah, it's really exciting to see, our vision really coming to reality with people taking this and hacking it and doing cool things with it. And, we just provide that foundational component, the basic voice experience, the skills abstraction, and then, as we start mass production, a reliable piece of hardware that people can use to do whatever they want, right?
That's awesome. Like how long, and I think this is already possible, but correct me if I'm wrong, but how long until I could just log into my Debian desktop and just say, hey, Mycroft, open my home folder and bring up my notes file, right? Because all these tech companies, I mean, Microsoft, I think, is getting away from Cortana, but they integrate that into the operating systems. Like we already have that. We could download it and run it. So is that something that is either A, possible, or B, that it maybe will become possible?
I think people are already doing it at some level. The guys at KDE have done a huge amount of work around Mycroft, right? AIX over there, built a plasma TV that uses Mycroft as the primary navigation. And then of course, because the way that Mycroft works is everything is sent to a message bus, right? So the audio transcription is dropped onto the JSON structure that comes back from the audio transcription. And I believe the text itself is dropped onto the message bus, and then the skill picks it up. And what that means is that, interacting with Mycroft over the CLI is probably even easier than interacting with it over voice, right? You just type in whatever you wanted to say, and it runs away and does what it's supposed to do. And so I believe that there already are several desktop integrations for Mycroft. I won't speak to how well they work, but on a desktop, it should work. Actually, if it's set up properly, it should work better on a desktop than it does on our device, because of course you've got more memory, you've got more storage, you've got a lot more processing time. You've probably got a network stack that's faster, and so yeah. I mean, I know I've seen a number of desktop integrations, and I'm looking forward to seeing a lot more. Unfortunately, we don't officially support any yet, but we are working to get from here to there.
It sounds like we're switching to KDE desktop, Jay, so we can do this.
I will say about the KDE Plasma desktop, I love GNOME, but it happens all the time where I look at the release notes for a new Plasma version. I'm like, why didn't anyone think of that? Why didn't anyone think of that? Like the time they came out with a feature where you can pause or skip music that's playing without unlocking your computer because the controls are there. And I'm like, just playing through my playlist, and maybe Coldplay is playing, and then a Korn song comes up. I'm like, I need to pause that button for the swear word start because my my young child is in the room with me. Oh crap, I forgot my password. And anyway, they come up with some really awesome things, and I guess it's just par for the course for them to integrate some kind of integration with Mycroft. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's been exciting. And their team's done a lot of work in it. So
I was going to say, one of the last questions that I really have that I think is important. I know, looking at the stats of my channels here, me and Jay get about 50% of our audience is in the United States. What are the languages currently supported in Mycroft, and what are the future plans around that?
Okay, so right now we've got English for certain. I know that there's been a ton of work in the German community around Mycroft, and then interesting Catalan, right? So, one of the communities that, the Cubo guys, are building that robot in Barcelona, and one of the communities, we traveled 2 years ago before COVID and did 22 cities over the course of a year. And in every city we went and met with people who were interested in open source, people who were interested in startups, and talked a little bit about what we were doing at Mycroft, both from a fundraising perspective and from a technology perspective, and got tons and tons of great input from people all over the world. The Mark I shipped to 56 countries. right? And I think that we have a similar number for the Mark II who have purchased devices. We've built an abstraction called lingua franca, which allows speakers of people who speak 2 languages. And I'm an American, so like the idea that you would put like 4 languages in one head is just crazy to me.
I know.
But, you know,
but common once you get outside of America.
yeah, most of the world can handle that. It's just not me. You know, if you speak more than 1 language, you can go into lingua franca and help to translate all of the prompts and all of the intents from any language that lingua franca supports into any other, right? So it's not just from English to Spanish and from English to Russian. If the only 2 languages you speak are Russian and Spanish, you can translate from Russian to Spanish, right?
Okay.
So in terms of official support, you know, today it's English, right? But there is a ton of work going on to expand that support into other languages. And actually, once we get that tool set really dialed in, and it's one of the things we'll be doing with this upcoming round of fundraising, you know, we plan to do a big push in internationalization because, you know, ultimately it's a community project, right? And if the community wants to, if the Catalan community wants a smart speaker that speaks Catalan instead of Spanish, you know, it's up to that community to make that happen. You know, we provide the supporting infrastructure, we provide, you know, a turnkey device, but you know, it's a community project. We're not Amazon, and we're not Facebook, and we're not Google. We don't have hundreds of billions of dollars to spend. You know, importantly, unlike those companies, we're also not under indictment by all 50 states, the federal government, and the EU. So that's good. But yeah, we need the community to help us get from here to there. And the quid pro quo is the community helps to make it go, right?
Yes.
And we make everything open so that they can use it how they choose to use it. And that's really the trade-off, you know, between the community contribution and what we as a company and what our investors are doing in terms of supporting it financially.
That's awesome. And being that it's Star Trek Day, I was hoping you'd say it spoke Klingon. But I imagine with the right community that likes devices like this, it would be a matter of time before it learns Klingon.
Yeah, I you know what? Like, one of the things as the founder, I'm constantly looking. You know, people ask, does Mycroft do something, right? And I'll run a web search and find out that somebody's doing it, right?
Yeah.
So it would not surprise me at all if somebody had done some kind of skill that allowed Mycroft to speak Klingon. Although, from what I've read, Klingon is not the most useful language for anything other than wanting to fight with somebody.
Which maybe, I mean, why not just fight with your Mycroft? I mean, that's a fun. They can just yell at it.
I'm hoping that there's not a time where Mycroft responds to everything with, "I'm afraid I can't do that, Dave."
Yeah.
Another sci-fi reference I had to throw in there.
We're old enough to know those ones.
Yeah, like the HAL 9000 version of Mycroft. You know, there's just so many places that it can be used. I mean, let's take that as an example. Here's my thing. So you think my good friend in Seattle, who's, you know, started shipping books and is now shipping everything, right? And has a rocket company. Do you really think that his voice assistant is not going to live on his rockets when he starts, if he ever gets one of those into orbit? And I'm going to put a big if next to that statement. You know, and if so, like, you know, the other billionaire putting things in space, who I'd like to point out does have things in orbit, needs a voice assistant for his rocket, and importantly, his cars. Right?
Yes.
We would love to talk to him because, of course, you know, lots of machine learning capabilities on those vehicles, big Linux stack running the center console. You know, we would love to be the voice, the alternative voice assistant for our friends at the electric car company as well.
Yeah.
So.
I'm positive he does not want the other places device in there.
Exactly, in his rocket or in his car. So
yeah, either one. He doesn't want that anywhere.
Yeah, and so, and you know, the cool thing about where we are today versus where we were 15 years ago, you know, automobiles had voice technology in them 15, 20 years ago. Like, almost every car out there, right?
Yeah.
And it just sucked so much, right? And so and that's why people never use it or almost never used it. And these things have come along so far today that, having a voice assistant that's customized for your car is a reality now. I mean, it's something that people can and should do. So, I am looking forward to somebody on this podcast going back and, loading Mycroft on their Raspberry Pi, installing it on their car, teaching it to speak Klingon so that they can speak Klingon to their car and swear at other drivers in Klingon and have it perform whatever functions. Right?
This seems like the perfect nerd project. I'm all in on this. So
I have to just put this out there because, if you or anyone else makes it compatible with cars and you don't do the voice of Kit from Knight Rider, you are doing it wrong. You absolutely have to synthesize that voice.
Yeah, I mean, the cool thing about the new neural networks is that once you get the voice trained, like, it's just one additional layer of training to make it sound like a specific person, right? And so then it comes down to like intellectual property and licensing and all that other fun stuff. But that's the type of thing that on the monetization side of a project like ours makes sense, right? So if people are paying us a monthly fee for the privilege of using Mycroft, what do we give them? Right. And so maybe the answer is celebrity voices, right? And the celebrity gets a small cut, and a small cut goes to us to support the company. We'd love to do music, right? For whatever reason, Spotify is refusing to work with us, talk to us, communicate with us in any way, shape, or form. But there are a bunch of other music streaming services out there that we would love to attach to the back end as part of what you get for a monthly fee, right? And so, yeah, like celebrity voices like Kit would be great. Celebrity voices like, well, heck, Jarvis from Iron Man. Like I'd love to have that.
For sure. That was actually the name of my Mycroft assistant for the longest time. And I only changed it back to Mycroft when I did that first video because, I'm doing a video and I don't want any trouble about that name. But, up until then, I was literally saying, hey, Jarvis for everything until I switched the name back. And you could change the name. I think we mentioned this earlier of Mycroft to something else if you want to call it something else.
Yep. And then, eventually I'd love to get into paid skills, right? And so that developers out there who are doing really cool things, one of the things we've been batting around the idea of is that we look at the number of uses an individual skill gets, the same way as one of the Silicon Valley companies looks at the number of ad views, right? Not tying those back to any individual, within our privacy policy in some way that makes sense. And then compensate the people who build the most popular skills with a percentage of the monthly revenue, right? And these are the types of things that in my view, right, really need to exist to make open source consumer-facing software, right, relevant in a world where everybody else is willing to give everything away as a supported service, right? And so, coming up with a facility that allows people to pay for what they're getting, to make sure that the developers who are developing things can support themselves, and innovate, I think is really, really critical. And it's something that we're excited to be experimenting with here, with Mycroft. And yeah, maybe that Klingon speaking car, costs, that skill costs 50 cents a month, and the developer gets to continue expanding the Klingon language. Maybe they connect it to an airsoft auto gun on the roof, right? Using a paid auto gun skill. There's just there's a lot of really, really cool stuff that can happen, once things become open.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been great. This is a fun conversation. People can obviously get started at is it mycroft.ai. I'll leave links in the show notes where you can buy one, donate, buy the book. I actually dropped that link in the live stream, but we'll make sure we'll leave that book thing, and we'll leave a link to your site. It's really cool for the patent trolls, because man, patent trolls, they are a burden, and they do tend to go after the smaller companies to get precedence to go after bigger ones. So they're a drain on society, like an innovation.
Yeah, they are. I'm a member, or I subscribed to the Mycroft newsletter some time ago. So I saw the news about that individual, what they were trying to do, hit the newsletter, and then what you were doing in response to that. And I just smiled. I'm like, yes, this is great. This is exactly what I would never want them to be in this position, but if they were, this is exactly what I want them to do. And they're doing it, and they've done it. So I think that sets an example for a lot of companies, because I think litigation disrupts innovation, and that's our biggest problem.
Yes, constantly.
Yeah, that's a challenge. And yeah, folks who want to support it, I'd love to sell them a copy of the book. And then, people who want to get in to early stage technology companies, have a little bit of money to spend, not their entire retirement, just like a small percentage of it, and want to come along for the ride as an investor, we'd love to have them, head to Mycroft AI, hit the invest now. It's really rare that companies in our space effectively go quasi-public this early. So maybe it's an opportunity to come along for the ride with us.
Yeah. Well, this is awesome. And thank you for joining. Thank you for sharing all this with us. This is a fun learning experience. I kind of knew the surface from watching Jay play with it, but boy, it's much bigger than I thought. I think our audience kind of learned a lot about it too. Definitely cool.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Well, you have sat through another episode of the Homelab show with this time with the Hey Mycroft. So thank you everyone for joining, and signing off until next time, next week. Everything's still on schedule. Now that Jay's, dedicating his time to content creation, we're going to have a pretty steady schedule of releases every week here. So all right. Thanks everyone, and talk to you next time.
Thanks.